Hello, my name is Kelly Xu. I'm a volunteer for the Asian community here in Arizona, and I'd like to send a very big greetings from the community to the Arizona Commemorative Air Force Museum Director Bobby Carlton. Bobby?
Thank you, Kelly. Happy to show you our museum today. We have a terrific museum. We've been here for 40 years, and our mission is to put up exhibits and offer a terrific education to the public about U.S. military aviation, and in particular, places where it intersects with our allies and our friends. And you'll see that as we go through the museum. We have a new exhibit on World War I, and we're actually installing it today, and it should be fully installed shortly, but we go all the way through the Vietnam War. Okay, we're in our main museum. We have two hangars. This is the main museum area, and this aircraft here is America's first combat plane. It is a full-size replica of a Newport 28, just like that flown by Eddie Rickenbacker, the famous ace in World War I. And we have exhibits next to it that give a narration, tell the story of Eddie Rickenbacker, as well as some of the developments during World War I and how military aviation came to be and proved itself actually as a fighter plane, as a bomber, and also totally changed tactics as far as aerial reconnaissance was concerned. Right next to it, this yellow aircraft is a 1930s version of a Stearman biplane. This was the most common trainer that was used to train military pilots in World War II. And even in advance of World War II, this is basically how the military pilots started their training. And typically, the student might start out in the front cockpit and the instructor in the back, and then switch places eventually. But the Chinese pilots that came to the United States would have also received their primary training in an aircraft exactly like this.
And what year would you say?
This would have been starting in the 1930s, and they continued using this type of an aircraft as a trainer into the 1940s. This aircraft here, this is a Bobcat or a T-50, and so it was used as a multi-engine trainer during World War II. So this was typically, you would have found an aircraft like this at Williams Field or down at Marana during World War II, training United States aviators in multi-engine flying, and also the other Allied pilots also would have received training in multi-engine in an aircraft like this. Folded wing airplane. You'll notice, first thing you notice how big it is, how much bigger it is than the Wildcat. This is a torpedo bomber, also known as a TBM. There were also earlier versions known as TBFs, but they're basically the same airplane. The difference between a TBM and a TBF actually is whether during the war they were manufactured by Ford or General Motors. That's really the only difference. But this is the same type aircraft that the senior George Bush, former president, flew as an aviator in World War II. And its mission was to carry torpedoes. It could also carry rockets and launch torpedoes at ships and submarines. This is P-51 Mustang, one of the most popular American fighters during World War II. This one is all painted up as an air racer. It's owned by the Odegaard family of North Dakota, who generously loan it for exhibition here. And this P-51 Mustang, was considered, the most formidable fighter in the war. Now things are getting a little bigger with this A-26 Invader, which was a medium bomber. The A-26 Invader and the B-25 Mitchell bomber kind of invented close air support, which is what we call it now, because they were very capable, carried lots of machine guns, carried lots of bombs. They could fly low and fast, considered kind of like the sports car bombers. And we also have a B-25, which I'll show you in a few minutes. It's in the other hangar. This is about approximately a 200-foot display wall of World War II topics. We cover the Doolittle raid, we cover the Tuskegee Airmen, the WASPs, air evacuation nurses. This exhibit here is a very poignant display concerning the loss of a B-17 bomber that crashed in France during World War II, and most of the crew were lost, and some of the wreckage was recovered and was donated to this museum. Our Chinese friends, we have a banner that was given to us to commemorate the friendship between the Chinese and the Americans during World War II, and all the flying that was done in the China, Burma, India theater. We have further exhibits. Exhibits that explain the Flying Tigers and their role prior to the United States entering World War II, as well as some artifacts you can see here, explaining the blood chit that appeared on the back of the flight jackets of the American aviators. And we're very fortunate to have the personal effects of one of the aviators that flew supply missions over the hump into China. And during the month of November, the daughter of this aviator comes to an event that we hold every year in November called Gathering of Legends, where we have a lot of families of some of these very important veterans from World War II come to reminisce and tell stories and share the important history of the contribution of these folks during World War II.
I think Mrs. Chanel just passed away last year.
Yes. That's right, I just heard that.
Yes, I met her.
Did you?
Several times in Washington, D.C. and went to her Watergate apartment several times.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
A wonderful lady.
Yes.
She's really a survivor.
Yes, I'll
early
say.
on.
Yes.
And really was genius in a certain way of keep this Flying Tiger history alive.
Yes. Well, certainly respect what she did and what so many others have done to keep that story alive. And there is, I think there is a Flying Tigers Association locally, and while I don't think there's any surviving members of the Flying Tigers in the group, it's all family members at this point, but they come and participate, and they conduct some events sometimes, and they'll come and let us know and post flyers so our members, who are all volunteers and interested in military history, to go participate as well. So this is a Korea exhibit. There's
that looks like a F.
We have an F-86 right there.
Right there.
Yep. I think this is one also. Or I think that's an F-86.
Certainly, I recognize it.
It's pretty close. This is a C-47. This particular aircraft has a long and distinguished actual combat record in World War II. This specific aircraft performed dozens of missions in the Mediterranean theater and was with the 60th Troop Carrier Group that was awarded the Distinguished Unit Citation in the war for its participation in those Mediterranean operations. There's a book called The Forgotten 500 that talks about the biggest rescue mission that you've never heard of, and this aircraft was part of it, where they were rescuing a lot of the American and Allied aviators that were downed in the Balkans during the 1943-44 time frame. This particular aircraft, one of its most interesting missions was when it was supplying some of the friendly partisans in Yugoslavia, and they put a couple of mules and some 75mm artillery pieces on this airplane and flew it into the mountains in the Balkans in the dark and landed it and unloaded the mules and the artillery pieces and took off again. So this airplane actually belongs to us. We fly it, and we also offer living history flights in this airplane to people. This is a B-25 Mitchell bomber. This is the same type of a bomber that was used in the infamous Doolittle raid over Tokyo in 1942. And that particular raid was when they secretly trained crews to take this Army Air Corps medium bomber, and they figured out how to fly it off a Navy aircraft carrier so that they could approach the Japanese islands in secret. And they launched over a dozen of these aircraft off the USS Hornet in April of 1942 and made the first attack on Tokyo. So this is the exact same type of aircraft that performed that mission. And this particular one, this is an example that came to us and was restored and put back into flying condition by the volunteers here. And we provide living history flights in this aircraft also. So it is a little congested, but this is, we have quite a few pride and joy aircraft. It's hard to pick a favorite, but this is probably our most famous aircraft that we operate here. This is a B-17 Flying Fortress. There's probably less than 10 of these left in the entire world that still fly, and we have one of them. And we also fly this aircraft around the United States and Canada during the summer as part of our Living History Flight program. And we also fly it locally here. We'll be flying it hopefully in December. We're doing some maintenance on it now, and they should be done by the end of November, so it should be going back up in the air by December 1st. But this is probably, next to the B-24, considered, the most significant heavy bomber in World War II. That literally hundreds of these would be massed together in these enormous formations that would fly over Germany on bombing raids. They were also used in the Pacific, part of the Pacific War down in Australia and New Guinea for bombing raids. It's a gorgeous airplane. The name of the airplane is Sentimental Journey, and Betty Grable is our icon. This airplane was donated to us by a member back in 1978. That after the war it was sold as surplus, and it was used for firebombing, for example, by a civilian company. And then it went to a boneyard somewhere and was put up for sale. And so one of our earliest members of the CAF purchased it and donated it to what was then called the Arizona wing of the CAF. And so it came here. There weren't any buildings here even. This hangar wasn't here, the other hangar wasn't here. It was just dirt, and volunteers restored it to flying condition. And then they... Wow, this thing is huge.
Huge,
George,
yeah.
this thing
The B-17.
The B-17.
Oh yes, this is like this is pretty heavenly. Yes, it's like it's pretty heavenly. Yeah, it's really great.
So what do we need to do in order to fly, to be a passenger in this plane?
Well, we have we sell the living history flights, and we have on our website. You can see the schedule, and you can sign up, and you can actually prepay for a flight. And this being our most prestigious airplane, this one happens to be also the most expensive, but it's definitely worth it. So we have 2 positions up in the Bombardier Navigator section, which is that where the plexiglass nose is in the front. That's where the famous Norden bomb site is. And those seats are currently priced at $850 a seat. The actual air time is probably about 20 minutes. The whole experience from the time that you start briefing, touring the airplane, taxiing out, waiting your turn to take off, waiting your turn to land. So it's about maybe, if you're lucky, but maybe about 45 minutes to an hour. But it's definitely a unique experience because the inside is totally authentic. Yeah. Totally authentic. There's no in-flight movie. No snacks. We don't serve snacks. Machine guns are set up. Yeah. We have 6 positions. You can crew on the airplane. So, this is the other hand. Yes, this is the tail.
The tail. So there's another. The gunner.
If you want to step up in the back, go ahead. You can walk forward as far as the ball turret, which is about 20 feet in front of you there. And then you can peek into the radio room, which is just in front of that. So this is the radio room, and when we do living history flights, 3 of our guests would be seated in the radio room. And this is behind me here is the waist gunner position. And we have 3 of our guests would fly back here. And then we would have 2 way up in the nose, which you can't see because it's kind of under.
Right.
What you see through the hatch there is the pilot station, and the nose is beyond that, and the bomb bay is.
They even have a sunroof.
Well, you could call it that. It's actually for a machine gun.
Oh, machine gun. Oh,
yes.
My God.
So when
this goes off.
It does. This is like a emergency release hatch. Now, when they were actually flying these in combat and they were anticipating being attacked by enemy fighters, most of the times they learned to remove the hatch before they even started flying. Because when you have to remove this when you're flying, you lose the hatch anyway. You never get it back. And this gun back here, you can see this is a really big machine gun. And it's also calibrated so you don't shoot your own tail off. You can see so it's like when it sweeps past the tail, there's an interrupter there that stops the bullets from coming out. So, as a matter of fact, the plexiglass in these side windows generally weren't in the plane either.
Right.
There were some versions where they started out having the plexiglass in it, but then, they get, after a while in combat, especially in the beginning of the war, when it's like the odds were so brutal, they just sort of gave up and said, the heck with it. Why bother keep putting this glass back in the plane? We'll just fly without it.
Yeah.
So this is a ball turret, another machine gun position, which you can look at again when you're outside the plane. You'll see back in the 1942, 43, and so forth, the average American man was a bit smaller than they are today, and they certainly have to be. When you look at this, you see that these guys were probably about 100 pounds, 110 pounds, and maybe 5'5". They were pretty small in order to fit in there. Wow. Working on the MiG-15 for placement in the museum in a couple of weeks, and The best we've been able to find out about the history of this particular M15 is that it looks like it was manufactured by the Chinese, and it was used by the North Korean Air Force, North Korean Navy during the Korean War.
Not Russian Navy?
No. I think that they.
It's a MiG-15.
No,
No,
it's just talking about the
versus the MiG.
versus the MiG-15, but this is a MiG-15. Yes. So this particular aircraft actually saw service in the Korean War. This is also a display area, and you'll see that we have a collection of leather flight jackets, including one with the famous blood chit on the back. An example of a MiG-21. This happens to be a Hungarian MiG-21. This was a very common aircraft that was flown by the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. Although this particular example is Hungarian.
This one looks.
This particular plane, the pilot would be in the front, and the back seat is what they call a radar intercept officer or weapons officer. So they split the roles in this particular kind of a fighter. You know, so it's kind of it's an indicator how complex aviation warfare had become with missiles and radars. Oh, that's a tank. That's an extra fuel tank. So this is it. So this was sort of a quick version of the tour. You can literally spend several hours here, immersing yourself as deep as you want in the stories of the airplanes and all the people who flew them, invented them, or developed tactics, and you know that their histories are very important to who we are as a military organization, and also serving, you know, the United States and our allies.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we welcome all of you to join us on December 14th, Friday at 1 o'clock at the Arizona Commemorative Air Force Museum. And you will be have the opportunity to hear from Mr. Li Jian Wang for him to talk about the Black Bat and Black Cat squadron, their history, and especially the U-2 flights. Thank you very much.